Do you love books? Do you wish you could hear some insights straight from the author themselves? Join Sam Hankin, your host, as he interviews top-selling book authors and dives into interesting and unforgettable discussions here at the Avid Reader.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Avid Reader, brought to you by Willing to Score Bookshop. Our guest today is Daryl Gregory, author of When We Were Real, published by Saga, which I guess is an imprint of Simon Schuster. It was released earlier this month. Now, if you don't know Daryl, after you read this book, you're going to want to read more of his books. So his website is very instructive. Since he's a coder, there's lots of really cool stuff in it, and it lists all his books, but he has a nice press kit. So, I mean, he wrote it, so I'm thinking, well, I should read what he wrote. But here's the problem is, hold on, got to get to the bottom of it.
You get to pick your length of 50 words, 100 words, whatever you want, Sam.
I see there's 60 words, there's 100 words, 150. They're sure as hell I'm not reading the 251. I like to talk too much to read that. So I'm gonna read the 60-word one and maybe put in part of the 100-word one, okay?
Got it.
Okay. So Daryl's an award-winning Daryl Gregory is an award-winning writer of novels, short stories. His latest novel is When We Are Real, the one we're going to talk about today. He's written several other works, including Revelator and Spoonbenders. Other books include the novellas The Album of Dr. Moreau, lots of puns with Gregory, and We All Are Completely Fine, and the short fiction collection Unpossible and Other Stories. He's been nominated for all kinds of awards, my favorite awards, Hugo, Nebula, the Edgar Award, and he also does all kinds of comic stuff and stuff for Planet of the Apes and Dracula. So it's a wide-ranging thing, and that's the end of that's probably like 110 words. Okay, now, so either the simulation or solipsism. That's the way it's been my take on the universe since I was 3 years old. So every day in the wintertime when it was snowing, even though I was Jewish, I would sled down the hill of the Catholic Church. One day, as I was flying at seemingly transonic speed, I prayed to Jesus and I said, if you exist, make my sled go to the left. And it didn't. So I said, okay, well, that's and then I said I did it myself. So I thought, well, this is probably just me, or what I think is me. And I haven't really changed much. And I don't even know today if Daryl's conscious or whether he's even here, or vice versa. In any event, like who used to be cool, Elon Musk, said he's 99% sure it's a simulation. And that's why he did Grok. So I'm up there. Either simulation or solipsism. Problem is when I interview these guys like David Chalmers and Philip Goff and all the philosophers and neurological guys and physics professors, whenever I mention solipsism, they get pissed off because they have a whole body of work. And if it's a solipsistic universe, they're screwed. And
right.
They make fun of me. But my point is, so I can stop talking, is that if you ponder this stuff as much as I do, a much more fun way of doing it rather than listening to me would be to read When We Were Real. So why don't we start off with that? So, hey, how you doing, Dale?
Pretty good. Yeah, I have two first names, so I respond to Greg, I respond to Gregory, I respond to Daryl. It's happened my entire life, you know.
Yeah, two first names. I always like that.
Right, me and Adam Christopher were thinking about forming an author group of just the two first names club. Well, first, thanks for having me here. You've had an amazing array of people coming in, and so one, I'm glad you dug the book, and two, I'm happy you're having me on.
Well, like I said, it was so cool because I picked the book out of Publishers Weekly, or it wasn't the Times Literary Supplement, or Kirkus, and I thought, this book looks cool. And then I started reading it like I told you, and I realized, wait a minute, something's weird here. This looks familiar. And then I realized I had read it and I loved it, and I go, oh, well, I'll just read it again. So I read it in one sitting like I did the first time. And
well,
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, the people in the book, one of the philosophical arguments they're having is, we're living in a simulation, but does this mean that we're being rebooted every day with our set of memories? And so you could just be getting a little glitch left over from your previous iteration, and that's what's happening here.
I just look at it as it's glitches all the way down, you know? Some guy said, every time you think something has a 1 in a million chance, it happens about every 30 days.
Right. Well, especially lately, these once every 100-year floods seem to be happening every 2 years. So,
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you about because we're talking about how I got the arc. I'm thinking, when did you start writing this? Because so much of what you've written has now actually occurred. I mean, you didn't write it when Trump was president. You wrote it when Biden was president,
well,
right?
I may have started when Trump was still president. We
Well,
were
yes, a
in
while
we
ago.
were in COVID when I started thinking about the book. I'm a slow writer, so I have this weird process where it takes me a long time to get started, where I just write in notebooks and talk to myself for almost a year until I figure out uh, somewhere to start and somewhere to end. And so I don't start until I have those two pieces. And usually I don't really have the actual ending. I have an ending and then I write toward it. And then about halfway through the book, I'm like, oh, wait. The real ending is this one. And I know that's happened enough times that I've stopped worrying and I just like, I know that's part of the process. At some point, I'll get better ideas the longer I think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so go ahead.
it's kind of like Sister Janet. She knows she's going to write the book, and she has her little moleskin type thingy with the two bands on it, but she doesn't know.
Yeah, I have mine right
The
here.
rabbi asked her. Rabbi said, "What are you writing about?" I don't know.
Well, we should tell people. So the book is about. We all found out 7 years ago we were living in a simulation, and uh, and so now 7 years have passed, and nobody's gotten superpowers. Nobody's learned super kung fu like Neo in the Matrix. And the question is like, well, now what do we do? And does it make any difference? And the religious people, like Sister Janet, um, the book's sort of based on Canterbury Tales. I sort of put a bunch of people on a pilgrimage. They're on a tour bus. But there are, because it's based on Canterbury Tales, I'm like, well, there has to be nuns in this. So there's two nuns and a rabbi. And one character says, "Oh man, I can't wait till they walk into a bar." Uh, and and a whole host of other people who are all arguing about, well, how should we act and what does the simulation actually mean and does it change anything essential? And so, yeah, Sister Janet is working on a book about um, God and what's the relationship to God. If you're a religious person and you find out you're living in a simulation, well, does that mean the simulators are the gods and God step back another remove, or we've been fooling ourselves the entire time? And if we've not been reliving the same day over and over again, if the simulation starts from a virtual Big Bang and moves forward, um, is even the people in the Bible were they part of the simulation? And Sister Janet says at one point, it'd be very annoying if Jesus knew he was in a simulation and just decided not to tell us. So those kind of conversations, basically the whole book is an excuse for me to keep talking about this stuff and have lots and lots of conversations. I pitched it to my agent as like, it's like the Matrix, but just the boring parts. And he was like, please don't tell anybody that.
Yeah, and you do have Neo in there and in dripping code, but it's funny because it's like when I was talking about Chalmers and Goff and all these other guys, I'm talking to them about their science and, like I said, their life's work in this ivory towers, and they always end up talking about the Matrix, and they always end up talking about the end of Men in Black. And I say to them, listen, you guys, you're really smart. Why are you referring to these movies as if there's some type of empirical basis for your entire thought process? Like, what do you
Well,
do?
and David Chalmers, I mean, while I was writing it, I was trying to figure out what everybody thought about the simulation. And Chalmers wrote a really interesting essay about the metaphysics of the Matrix and what does it imply. And there's a great thing you can find on YouTube where Chalmers and Neil deGrasse Tyson and a bunch of other people are all talking, and Max Tegmark, who's a physicist who's thought a lot about the simulation, and they're all sort of debating things. And uh, Chalmers' point is that unless the simulators tell us that we're in a simulation, we're probably not going to figure it out. So, does it make any difference if we're made out of zeros and ones rather than what Max Tegmark calls a cloud of quarks? Like quarks work according to math too. So we're all sort of math programs running. Um, and so I was really interested in that idea. It's like, well, does it make any difference? Like if I love you and you love me, that because we're conscious, that means that emotion is real no matter what we're made out of. And I was really interested in that idea of well, if we're both running on the same platform, what is our job then? If we're both real as far as we understand it, as far as we can understand, then what's our job? What's the purpose of life? And maybe our job is just to take care of other people on the bus. Maybe that's the whole deal. Like we're in this together, whatever platform we're running on, we're in it together. So maybe that's our only job.
And that's what Janet says. She says just basically if it's a simulation, just do the same stuff you would do. Be nice, be good.
Be nice. Yeah. There's an economist at George Mason named Robin Hanson, and I was reading him and he had some thoughts on the simulation. Um, and and so one person on the bus takes his advice. There's this person called the influencer. She's 19, pretending to be 24, and she's a makeup influencer. And her whole scheme is to like be as famous as possible so the simulators and as interesting as possible so the simulators don't delete her and her unborn child. Um, and it's kind of a wacky theory, but that's what she's committing to. And it's based on this Robin Hanson guy who said, if we ever figure out we're living in a simulation, our job should be to be as interesting as possible, even if that means being jerks to other people. It was kind of the asshole theory of being of existing in a simulation. It's kind of a terrible idea. Um, but if the simulation is a kind of show, and if computing resources are limited and they might cut some of it to concentrate on the stuff they're interested in, it makes a weird kind of sense to sort of be sort of a Housewives of New Jersey kind of figure and flipping tables and being super interesting for the simulators and being so dramatic they don't want to delete you. But I think it would make you a terrible person to be around.
The thing is, like, you do a couple, I never can pronounce it right. Like, do a machina. How do you say that?
Deus machina.
Deus machina.
I'm an English major, so this is the only stuff we ever learned, right? We don't have anything useful at our fingertips. And I was a theater major too, so
Same as me. English literature and Canterbury Tales. But I was going to say was you do some conveniences like in the tunnel, there's delicious bread and there's a sunflower faucet and the air is perfectly ambient and there's a nice bathroom. And when I talked to David Chalmers about Reality Plus, I said, because he's saying, you can sit there, it's exactly the same as living. And I said, but where do you poop? Where's your food? It doesn't work. But you made it so it worked.
Yeah, because, and this is one of the debates they have, which is like, if we're living in a simulation, why did they make it so complicated? Why the fake food? Why the pooping? Why all of it? Like, why make a fake sky with fake stars? And so that's one of the debates. And so then I was like, well, as a science fiction writer, I had to come up with a reason the simulators would want to be so elaborate. Because there's no, clear reason why it need to be that complicated. And one of the theories is that these are ancestor simulations. Like if we are in a simulation, and that's not what Nick Bostrom originally argued from his original essay, that he wasn't trying to argue that we're definitely living in a simulation. I think Elon Musk may have gone too far with that. But if we are in one, one of the theories that that the reason why they may have created it is because they want to figure out what their ancestors were like and maybe run alternate scenarios, like what happens at Waterloo if it goes differently. And so in that case, you'd want to make the simulation real enough so how all the variables are in play so you can have a firmer answer about what our ancestors really were doing and what it was like to be then. And maybe they're all maybe this whole simulation is that a tourist trap, and they like to visit and walk around and actually eat the food and poop and do all that kind of stuff.
Well, like you said, and like a Jillian posits the idea is, run all. I mean, if you're going to do this, run. You got all time and space in the world. Just run all the iterations, and one of them is going to come out the best.
Well, right, and that's sort of where Elon Musk comes out with the 99% figure. So Nick Bostrom's whole essay was about he had three proposals, like either we go extinct before we can make a simulation, um, or two, for some reason in the future it's unlikely that we ever make a simulation. Maybe it's unethical, maybe it's not interesting enough for them to make large scale simulations, or three, large scale simulations are running. And then as soon as large scale simulations are running, the math argument goes, well, so that means you're not going to make just one simulation. There's probably billions of simulations. And if there's billions of simulations and billions of people in those worlds, the odds that we're not in a simulation go down and down. The odds that we're the original people and not running on one of these later simulations get lower and lower just from the numbers. And so that's where you get the idea that um, our odds of being in a simulation are really high. It's presuming that the third argument's in effect from Nick Bostrom, and then it's presuming that they're not going to just make one; they're going to make lots of these simulations everywhere.
And yeah, and the other theory, I forget which science fiction writer said it, is the idea is the reason we can't find human life is by the time any alien species gets to the point where they can travel intergalactically, they also destroy themselves.
Right, right. This is the Fermi paradox. Like where are all the other aliens? And one of the answers to the paradox is, yeah, they as soon as you get to the ability to move off planet, you probably figured out nuclear fission, you probably made a bomb, and then you're probably toast. Or you've cooked your whole planet, or you've got the answer like the three body problem, which is, it's in Cixin Liu's, novel, and now that TV show.
Yeah.
The answer to the Fermi's paradox is that everybody's keeping quiet because you don't want to attract the attention of somebody more technologically advanced than you, because they'll just come and wipe you out. So stay quiet, keep your radio waves down, don't advertise your presence.
Isn't she like the most smartest person in the world? Like she's 26 years old and she's written these books that are and she just keeps doing stuff. If you ever look at like her blog, she's just constantly doing things that in one day she does more than I've done in my entire life.
I haven't seen the blog, but certainly, I mean that book and that series had a huge effect, and um, it's always nice when science fiction does sort of break through into the larger conversation. Um, and then I assume, like a teacher of mine who's become a friend, Kim Stanley Robinson, wrote this book, Ministry for the Future, and he's been writing science fiction for decades, and he's always the smartest guy I know. And but that book became part of the whole, well, even a global conversation. People in Davos are reading it, and presidents are reading it, and all it's about is trying to figure out, well, given like where we are now with climate change, what are our options? And how can we get out of this? And he's a techno optimist in a way in that he's not a Pollyanna figure, but he is trying to figure out, um, there's no use talking about it's all doom. Like, let's try to imagine ways out of it, and giving people hope. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not like that.
Yeah.
I'm just putting people on the bus and seeing what they talk about.
Yeah. I mean, the Red Mars trilogy really did affect me. I mean, and yeah, when I read it, I thought, okay, is this possible? Yeah, it's possible. And now it's possible. I mean, there's all
Right.
kinds of,
Well, and he wrote this book that had a huge effect on When We Were Real. He wrote this book called Aurora about a generation ship. And I just love this book. And it's anybody who then, so if people listening in who don't read science fiction, generation ship stuff is an old idea where if we can't move faster than light, how do we get to other planets? Maybe we have to put generations of people on a giant arc and send them across space, and maybe it takes a couple hundred years to get to the planet. And this is a common trope in science fiction. And so the question for Stan was like, well, one, how do you survive that long to get there? And two, if you get to a planet with life, um, can you uh, is it going to be poison to you? And if it's lifeless when you get there, then you might as well have stayed home. So he sort of messes with science fiction. And what I liked about that idea was the idea of taking a trope in science fiction like the simulation theory and just sort of spending the entire novel sort of poking at it. It's like, well, how will this actually work out? And then on the bus, nobody's quite agreeing. And I put my thumb on the scale on a few of these things. I tend to agree with Sister Janet about treating each
Well,
other like we're real. Anyways,
yeah.
but that was the whole point of that book.
Since I tend to wander around when I talk to you, I assume everyone's already read the book, which is unfair to
Right?
you. Yeah, so let's
I'm
talk a
trying to
little bit.
sell books here, Sam.
I know I always say that. So I mean, you could show the chart, which is a great chart, or you could just like give a list of the characters like you would in the Canterbury Tales. But I guess maybe you should start with like the impossibles because it's the most exciting part of the book, and that's where the pilgrimage is going. So let's go through the five of them, four of
Uh,
them.
yeah, let's do that. So the impossibles are these things in the landscape that are like glitches, um, physics-defying things in the landscape that are sort of proofs that we're living in a simulation. They can't possibly exist, but you can go visit them, and it's clear the simulators put them there to sort of prove to us that we're living in a simulation. And so, like I said, the book takes place 7 years after the announcement that we're all living in a simulation and after the first appearance of these things. And so now the freak out is over, and then people are in the what now period of of life. And so the bus tour is visiting North America's impossibles. And they start with the frozen tornado, which is just this structure made out of indestructible stuff. It seems to be denser than atoms because if you're living in a video game, you can just declare that matter is solid. Unlike, you can just have alternate forms of matter that are just basically game objects that you can't interact with or can't cut, you can't do anything to them. They're just facts of the world. And that it starts from there, and then some of my favorites are like the hollow sheep. There's the hollow flock, which is made out of these sort of soft, squishy sheep with no heads, no tails. They just sort of wander around, and the question there is, well, what are they doing their thinking with, and how does this work, and what does this say about us? And maybe the point of those sheep is that, oh, we're also just sheep with a bunch of parts, and we're moving around and thinking, but maybe it doesn't make any sense how we work either.
And the fact that the sheep follows the rabbi around, and the rabbi reminds me of so many rabbis from as I've grown up. It's like they're so nice, they're so soft spoken, but they don't seem to really have. They're not quite sure if what they are doing is. They're not quite sure.
Yeah, that's the rabbi's whole problem. He's a thinking man, but he can see three sides to every problem. So every time somebody says, "Well, it could be this," he's like, "Well, yeah, it could be that actually." And so he can turn himself around in circles, never deciding anything. And one of my rules for the book is that every single character has some sort of arc. Like they have to move somehow and change in the book. And for the rabbi, his thing was, well, maybe he finally learns to sort of act on faith or gut instinct or whatever you want to call it, like to just make a decision, even though you haven't thought through every single permutation of it. Sometimes maybe you just have to act, and the sheep keep following him around all throughout the book. And it turns out to be the key to him trusting his gut, in the very end.
Yeah, like the reader. Um, One of the things that oh shit, I got so many questions. I'm when I'm not looking at you, I'm writing stuff down.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
So what made you think of doing the reminders? Because I thought, why don't you stick the reminders in? And you see balloon letters like the Jeff Kuhn dogs and
Yeah, the reminders are once a week. We get when you wake up in the morning and open your eyes, wherever you are in the world, you get a reminder saying you're still living in a simulation. And everybody gets their own font. Everybody gets, every single person gets a slightly different message, or a slightly different format for the message. Um, I don't know. I think it comes from being a software developer and having those EULA agreements pop up all the time. And sometimes when you're writing a book, you put stuff in. that just makes you laugh, and you're not even sure it's going to make anyone else laugh. And so I put it in there, and my editor actually said, you can cut this. I'm like, can I just keep it? I want to keep this joke. It appears once on the, it appears in just one day during the trip, and because I thought when I was thinking about the simulators, obviously one of their variables for why they put us in a simulation is to continually remind us we're in a simulation. And my question in the book is why? What are they up to? Why do they want to keep reminding us? And I thought, okay, a weekly reminder is there. The impossibles are there to remind us. Um, and then part of it is boredom on the page. Like, what could be? I'm a little bored here. What can I do to, make things interesting for myself? And honestly, that's why the sheep started following the rabbi. I have the rabbi hanging out in the hollow flock. He's going to talk to Sister Janet. And I'm like, what's some bit of business that would be fun? And then having the sheep follow him, I thought was funny because he's like really perturbed by it because he doesn't know what's up. And then it keeps happening.
He walks up to someone and he goes, "Hey, so do sheep do they ever go into the tunnel?"
Right? He's like, are they going to follow me everywhere? Um, and yeah, and other people, he's pretty perturbed too because no one seems as upset about this as he is. Like he keeps seeing them. It's like he's being haunted by a ghost. But then you have this thing where if you're writing a book, you got to pay off the joke. Like there's, famously the rule of three. Like if you have a setup, the sheep is following, and you have a follow up where the sheep's still following him. And at some point, you have to do something with it to pay off why it's been present in the book. And so when I first introduced the idea, I didn't have a payoff yet. And I was
Right.
late in the book when I was like, oh, this is the role they play at the end of the book. Because at the end of the book, one of my rules was everybody on the bus has to save everybody else somehow. There's a big climax happens. There's gunfire. There's lots of stuff. But I thought, oh, this is the role the sheep plays. This is the role the rabbi will play in saving other people. And yeah, but the other, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you talk about the arc, there's two questions I'm writing down. One is, I like the way you make Lady M. She's not dumb. She's not dumb. I mean, you think at first she's dumb because she's an influencer and we all have our own opinions of them and what they do. But then, the John Galt thing and the fact that she talks about the fountainhead, and then she comes up with these things that make perfect sense in a semi-intellectual way. So they're deep characters, and they have these arcs, and then we haven't even talked yet about the two characters that essentially are the protagonists.
Oh, right. Yeah.
You might as well talk about them and what JD's situation is.
Yeah. So, I mean, the influencer is a good example of, I started like Canterbury Tales. So in the prologue of Canterbury Tales, Chaucer just introduces people by their titles, the knight, the prioress, the wife of Bath, and I knew I was going to sort of copy the prologue. I'm going to start with April showers and a bunch of pilgrims going on the road. Each of them wants something different by the end. But I also knew that if I give you all these names all at once, the reader that's too much cognitive load for the reader. They may just shut down and put the book down. So I just start with everybody's titles, and then as we go through the book, you pick up more and more names. And also the rule is that like you get your first understanding of the characters should get more and more complicated as the book goes on. And the influencer was like that. I decided, yeah, she's not going to be dumb. She's going to be super bright, but she's just chosen this weird path for trying to survive the simulation. And she's going to be absolutely determined about shaping events as much as she can to make her goals happen. And I found her really fun to write because she's super annoying through a lot of the book, and then maybe the entire book.
The other thing about her, again, like we were talking about the author Lou, she's a really hard worker. It's hard work every day doing that stuff.
Oh, really? I mean, it's super hard. And so I was watching a lot of these makeup tutorials and also talking to my daughter. I mean, it's good to have kids because they can help you stay in touch with the youth. And my daughter walked me through. She's like, here's a 3-step makeover tutorial, like, and she walked me through all the different steps. She's like, here's the 30 products she could have in her bag. And she would just, my daughter walked me through all of this stuff, and it was great. My daughter's 33, but she's helped me several times in books, and so is my son. Yeah, so it's soup, and she's a hard worker. She's watching her numbers. She's trying to make a working business. I kind of love her for her determination in the book. Um,
I don't communicate with a lot of companies by, and I've never written a Yelp review. I can't do it. But sometimes I'll look at like the Delta Airlines website and I'll write them a note. Can you hire two 14-year-old kids to redo your website?
right. I know. As a, I spent years as a web developer, and then I was a half-time programmer, half-time writer, and then I became a full-time writer. It's a whole journey. But still, today I build websites for people. Uh, some of them for free, just groups that I want to help out. And yeah, some of the absolute train wrecks of websites and stuff. And so one of the main characters in the book is the engineer, and that's JP. He's one of the main guys, and he has a brain tumor that's coming back. And he and his friend Dulin are on one last trip across America. But a lot of the stuff that the engineer that bothers the engineer are bad designs of things. Like, just people haven't thought through it. Like, he's at the breakfast buffet at the hotel, and he was like, all of these designs are terrible.
The
Like, who
waffle
made the
maker.
spinning wallet, spinning waffle thing? Because the primary users of it are unattended 8-year-olds. So who decided, let's just pour a lot of batter all over the place and have it flip? Good
It's such
idea, bad
it's such an
execution.
attractive nuisance. I mean, what kid sees that and cannot do it? There's
Right?
no way.
Even if you don't want a waffle, if you're 8 years old, you want to
Right.
work that machine.
What's flipping it? Because flipping it is it's like an impossible, right?
Yeah.
How can you flip that? It doesn't make any sense.
Or the cereal things that they always build, these cereal dispensers that
Oh
seem to
yeah.
grind cereal into a powder. If you ever try to get Raisin Bran out of one of these things, it's like, this is not well designed.
If you
So
go to Kiwi yogurt, if you go to Kiwi yogurt and you go down to all the different things, when you get to the coconut, it says if the coconut doesn't come out, go find a staff member. Because when you turn a coconut, it's stuck in there. The coconut's not going to come out a little hole.
I like the fact that there's a whole policy effect. They had to make a sign. There may be a coconut specialist on staff.
Just put it in a
Uh,
bowl. Boom.
yeah, so JP and Dulin are the main characters, and they're sort of based on, very loosely, on me and my friend Jack. My friend Jack had a brain tumor scare. Uh, and at a separate time, we went on a cross-country trip together. And the novel started thinking about, like, what if me and Jack were on the road, going across America? We've done this cross-country trip. And then I realized, well, that's going to be too cramped, just two guys in a car. And I want them to have lots of conversations about the simulation. So I'm like, well, that's what led me to, let's do a bus. And if we're doing a bus, let's do Canterbury Tales. Let's have 19 people, and they all have their own point of view chapters, and let's just go to town. And you made a reference to this earlier. People who get the book should hold, in one of the opening pages is a seating chart with everybody's name and where they're sitting on the bus. I was just trying to throw a bone to the reader, saying, look, if you get lost, check this chart.
So funny because when I first saw it, I did what people do when they see those. They go, "Oh, this is so complicated." It's like when you read 100 Years of Solitude and it has the family tree and everyone is named Aurelio. And you go, "Oh, there's no way. How am I going to do this?"
Well, yeah,
But
and there's a long tradition of that, like in fantasy books, there's always the map with
uh,
like 100
yeah.
places with usually they have apostrophes in their name and they're hard to figure out.
And you can tell if it's a good book by the end of it, you know the chart without even going back to the chart, which you do, which here it's like it's a great chart. I mean, especially like, and then we don't have time to talk about the octos, but I like where they sit. It's in the back on the left, and I know Lady M is sitting by the toilet. Except the other thing that was really funny about the book, the first paragraph when Dulin appears, I know he's you. The first, when the two nuns and a rabbi go into a bar. Yeah, because you're so corny.
Yeah, my kids know that they know my dad jokes. Well, and one of my, and I learned this at some point in writing books. I'm going to have at least one character with my sense of humor. And a character who people will say, "Oh, that's the highly verbal person," because when you're writing a book and it takes a couple years, every funny thing, I've got 2 years to think of the best possible lines, so I can give them to a character who, in the moment, is just, can say everything, make every joke I want to make.
That's a great way
Um,
to write it. You
yeah.
remember in Ulysses, the Nighttown episode, and I've done this before too. You ever go to a bar and just sit there by yourself with a notepad and listen to things people say and just write them down? It's better than you could ever write.
Oh, and it's so weird. I do this exercise. I send my students to do that. I send them to cafes, and I'm like, just sit with your notebook and just listen. And one of the things they're always surprised by is how fragmented, random, contradictory it is. Like the things people will say, even in conversation with each other, that don't seem to connect to each other. And you realize each of these, especially at a bar, you'll realize, oh, these two guys, they each have a monologue that they're trying to get out. And the other guy's interrupting their monologue to do their
That's,
monologue.
that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we should do this podcast at a bar, Sam. We'll just hang out.
Yeah, every time I read a good book, I say, let's go get a drink. But usually, we're 2,000 miles away. But yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing about a good interview, or, it's like giving a speech. If you know your top, and my brother writes I practiced law. At some 45 years, I did medical negligence. We had a trial one time. And my co-counsel had everything for the closing arguments on 3x5 cards, every single thing. As soon as he started, he dropped them on the floor. And they got out of order. So, if you're going to make a talk to someone and you know your topic, like my dad used to say, okay, you know your topic. So what's the big
Right?
deal?
Right. I mean, I'm an ex-teacher. I taught high school for a few years, and I still teach creative writing at places. And uh, I enjoy the process, but especially I enjoy now teaching writing because I probably heard all of the entry level questions, so I can just riff now. Like it's not when I first started out teaching high school. One, I looked like I was 12 years old. I was fresh out of college, and a kid came up to me on my first day and said, "Why are you wearing a tie?" And I'm like, "I'm a teacher." And he's like, "What?" Um, and I was so nervous that I would over prepare like that. And now it's like it's good to get to a stage of life where I can relax and just riff.
The other reason I knew this would work out is like on your website where you kind of truncate your name and you're off to the left. And then you go, yeah, this is me smiling. Shut up.
I have this trouble with photographs where I always look like I've just swallowed something uncomfortable. Um, and my daughter is like very photogenic, and she just always naturally lights up, and I'm like, I don't know how she does it. Yeah. So I always tend to look at pictures of myself and think, oh, that's a shame. That's
It's
really a
like my
shame.
brother Bob. He says he's a Buddhist. He's been meditating for 40 years. Maybe he is a Buddhist. I don't know. But when there's a family picture, for some reason, he's always in the middle and his eyes are like closed like this. And he looks like he's dreaming the simulation. He always looks like he's creating the family.
I like it.
All right. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about Lady M's protege and the protege's poor father. the, gra-
Yeah.
the gravity, 30 fall.
Well, yeah, there's a guy in the bus called the realist, and there had to be somebody on the bus like this who thought the entire simulation was this elaborate hoax, a plot by the deep state. Like his whole thing is like, I don't, despite all this evidence of the impossibles, despite everything we know and the weekly reminders, somehow we're being tricked by, and it's unclear who they are, but he's trying to start a podcast, and he's got his young son Christopher. Well, he's like his son's like 24, but mentally feels younger than me, younger to me. And he, of course, he hasn't gotten around to actually releasing any of the podcast episodes yet. He's just constantly planning how he's really going to give it to the morons who are being sucked into this hoax. Um, and he's literally hoisted kind of by his own petard in an early event where they go to the geysers of mystery, which are these spots on the ground where gravity's inverted. And I'll let your listeners imagine what happens next. Um, he was a lot of fun to write, but he was extremely tiresome because his whole vibe is to try to take over every conversation. So he leaves the tour early and then comes back near the end. But his son Christopher is sort of he's the son of a narcissist, and then he falls in with the influencer who's her own kind of narcissist. And Christopher is sort of the lost kid who's sort of trying to become whatever people want from him. And Lisa Marie, the influencer, basically turns him into a Matrix wannabe. She shaves off his red hair to give him a fierce look and dresses him in Matrix clothing. Gives him an online name of John Galt. It's yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny. It's so funny because when I was saying your novel was somewhat prescient because I wanted to know when you started writing it, the realist reminds me of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
She's just gonna keep yelling at people.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, those people are always with us. And and also I wanted even him who is probably the most annoying off the bat, um I give him a little redemption moment. I mean,
Yeah.
he even the most annoying people still love their kids. And so even though he doesn't know how to really see his son as a full person, um, by the end he's trying. He's at least trying.
Well, and speaking of trying, and also one of the most, well, the reader, but and you can talk about him. That's kind of a spoiler too. But if you talk about the triad of the rabbi and Janet and her
Oh,
supposed
Sister Patrice, right? Yeah.
her supposed amanuensis. So yeah, talk about her and yeah, and the tour guide too, because everybody, like you say, they have an arc. The tour guide has this incredible arc.
Yeah, the tour guide is this young woman from Pakistani descent, and she's been shoved onto this. Somebody, the regular tour guide has gone missing, and so she gets the job, and they're like, just get on this tour bus, and here's a binder full of stuff, and go. And she spends most of the book petrified, and then also trying to quit, especially as shit starts happening and terrible things start happening and she just loses it. And then by the end her thing is like I want people to hang in with her as she figures it out and then becomes the guide that they need at the end. I mean she I wanted her to figure it out or at least find some part of herself that was stronger than she thought it was.
It's kind of, in some ways, and you have done some mystery sci-fi, but in some ways it's almost like an Agatha Christie novel because, you have this absent guide, Peter, who he's not there. But nonetheless, the first thing I thought is, man, I would love to go on a tour where he was the guide. Why the hell am I thinking of that? It was like one paragraph, right?
Right. He's mentioned and then he's like, and the driver of the bus is very worried because she doesn't know why he canceled and doesn't know if he's okay. Um, and I pay that off way late in the book. The driver gets to go track him down. Um, but yeah, I mean, because the other thing I was thinking about is that everybody on the bus, including the driver, loves someone and is worried about them. And some of those people are on the bus and some of those people are off the bus. Um, but I just wanted to make sure that I just figured out at some point in my life that I write better out of empathy than out of, I've written backstabbing characters and I've written mean people. But I think my sentences are better when I can figure out how do these terrible people, what do they actually care about and who do they love? And um, I think my writing gets better. So out of sheer self-preservation, I'm like, I'm going to look for moments where I can give these people their moments, even if they're annoying when you first meet them. And if I can keep the reader following along long enough to hang in there, if they don't throw the book away when they get to someone who really annoys them, that'd be great.
Talking about Sister Janet, one of the most poignant moments in the book for me was when you explain, you have this omniscient third person throughout, knows everything. But when Sister Janet, you explain that what she does, even though she's depressed, even though she barely smiles, is when she looks at you and she asks you a question, she honestly wants to know what your answer is. And she's integrated in that sense that this is something she's honestly interested in. It's like altruism. Yeah. And it's funny because you only meet like 6 or 7 people like that. You can count them on the fingers of your life. I mean, a lot,
right?
We listen to each other, but we're not, it's not the same kind of listening. And one of them, you talk about your daughter, one is my daughter. My daughter is like I adopted her from China. She's like the most integrated person. She's Annie. And all she is Annie. There's no commentator in her head saying this, saying that. She's just Annie. So like, and she loves free stuff. So she loves to get like, she's at the University of Richmond. She likes to get free tumblers and t-shirts. And so she got this free monastery trip where it was like more like a nunnery. They were nuns. And so she's sitting there and the nuns are lecturing and she goes, "Hey, so do the nuns still beat the kids?" And she's not saying it out of it. Like it's not, it came into her head. And then the nun goes, "No, there's no beating here."
Well, God bless you. You're right. They're rare on the ground, right? The people who are, who really are listening, who aren't just waiting for you to stop talking so they can make their next point. And the way I grew up was like in my head, I was always editing. I always felt like I was trying to figure out, can I say this? Should I say this? Like, or that might offend them. So I'm gonna hold back and then I can put it in a book later. So there's always a voice managing things, and I wish I was more present. And I met a few of those people who I think, oh, you're some sort of, I like your word integrated, it's almost like in the Buddhist sense, like they're just present in the moment. They're actually there. And they actually want to know.
Everyone always calls Annie an old soul, and it seems like cliche, but okay, why do you think we're doing what we do? Like you're talking, and then I say, and then you go, okay, go ahead, Sam. And then I'm talking, and why do you think we're doing that? Is it ego? I mean, you think what you're saying is more important. I don't want to stop because I don't want to make Sam talk because I want to say what I want to say, and I do the same thing. Why do we do that?
I don't know, and part of it is like, we're in this artificial sort of thing where it's like we're talking about the book, and so while I'm talking to you, I'm also thinking about, okay, who's listening and do they understand the context of what we're talking about? Like, how much do I need to explain? So there's an editor in me that's always like, okay, let me set some context back here, and then sometimes I forget to set the context and I just answer you. And so even as I'm talking, I'm editing, and yeah, so I'm trying to talk about the book, and you've got your questions you want to ask me.
Because I read the book and I read it closely, and I want to know the answer.
Yeah, right.
And then I forget that the people who were listening haven't read the book. But I don't care. I just wanted to find answers from you, but that's not good for you.
Well, yeah, yeah, I think if you and I were at the bar, we wouldn't have to worry about any of this, right? No. We wouldn't have to worry about an audience. But this is one of the things I give as writing advice too. I said, if you want to make a scene interesting, add a third person. Because sometimes they'll have a really static scene where people are going back and forth, maybe they're arguing. But having a third person as an audience or someone they have to win over or not appear so crazy to can make your scene really interesting. Because now you got to do two things. Let's say you and I are having an argument. I'd be trying to win the argument with you, but not alienate this person, or maybe try to seem like the super reasonable person so that person who's listening is on my side and not your side. And so I tell writers to mess around with a scene, put multiple people in there, and also each of those people in the scene, they each have their own goals. So what if the third person in the scene is also trying to talk and wants something from one of us? And so that just means, talk about a three body problem. It just makes every dialogue more interesting and more complicated. And it goes back to what we were talking about with people at the bar, where sometimes people are just they have a goal and they're trying to accomplish their goal, and the other person's trying to accomplish their goal. And so sometimes they're just beating their heads against each other.
Is that why you think the one review goes, the omniscient third person narrator or whatever? Is that the third person in your book?
Sometimes, well, I mean, one of the things I was fooling around with, there's an omniscient narrator who is explicitly omniscient in the prologue and in this intermission in the middle, and then comes back at the end.
Right.
Sort of echo the way Chaucer was writing Canterbury Tales, where it's like there's Chaucer is explicitly Chaucer writing these prologues, and then when we get to the tales, they're pretty much following closely that person's story. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to steal from this guy. I'm going to steal from Chaucer. He won't mind. He's been dead for 700 years. Um, and then, but also, it does do something to the book to think that they're not just an omniscient narrator, but they're an omniscient narrator who I knew what their personality was. And so they have their own take on the story. And they can be a little snarky, or they can be commenting on things. And that gave me a way to write. So they're not purely like a godlike omniscient narrator, but they are omniscient because they're watching the simulation at the same time we are. So one reason the book's written in present tense, just to get super nerdy, is another writer asked me, like, why is this thing in present tense? I'm like, because I wanted to feel like this is the show you're watching right now in the moment.
That's
And
why
the narrator's watching it.
my friend Ethan, he's outside. I was just talking to him about the book, and he goes, that should be a movie.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to make it a TV show.
It should be. It's so cinematic. I mean, every scene, like when they're in the canteen or whatever, the snack place, and they're getting the trays. And I mean, to me, that was like, I can see the screen. I could see the screenplay of that. I can just see them coming and sitting at the table, not being sure they should sit at that table. And, it really was. But
Well, I always think in scenes a lot of the time. So I'm thinking of dramatic scenes, who wants what. This is from David Mamet's advice. Like, a scene's dramatic when you answer the three questions, like who wants what happens if they don't get it, and why now? Like, why does it have to happen right now? And that I'm always thinking of that when I'm writing.
the rabbi in that scene, the rabbi can't decide what to eat, the sandwich or and then his sister Janet just says he'll have this. He can't even decide. And he even comments on it like rabbis do. Isn't it true? Don't we all feel like it's all, it's like the sandwich seems as if, but then also. And the dialogue would be, really great to write. Isn't a funny one. So I went to University of Florida, majored in English literature, and I graduated with high honors, not to brag. And the reason why I'm not bragging is because I read the Canterbury Tales and I thought, this is great. I love it. It's so funny. It's so bawdy. It's the coolest thing. And all my friends are reading Cliff Notes. I'm going, why don't you just read it and then you'll get an A? Because if you read Tristram Shandy, which is again,
body, yeah,
and it takes them 100 pages to get born. It's like this homunculus. And then if you read it, which is kind of a tough read, except you like it so much, you just keep reading it. So then what do you take the test? What do you get? You get an A+. There's nothing else you can get. But if you read the Cliff Notes, it's not, why would you do that? But they didn't understand.
Well, especially when you're assigned something like Canterbury Tales, you're like, oh, this is going to be boring. But Chaucer's big innovation, and this is one thing I wanted to really copy was, he would mix the high and low. He would have tales of nobility. He would have, he would have fart jokes, he would have sex jokes. He has everything's in that. And he of course died before he finished, but um I thought, oh, okay, that's one of the marching orders for the book too. Is like I'm gonna do there's gonna be there's gonna be physical comedy, there's gonna be pratfalls, there's gonna be verbal stuff. But I also want to make you cry once at least.
The other thing that's you can tell about a good book is I remember look how I'm remembering the names. If you remember the names of the people, then it's a good book. It's like going back to the Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. You remember
Yeah.
John Galt, Peter Keaton, uh, now Ellsworth Toohey, Dominique. I can remember every character in all of his books. Hank Reardon,
Oh
the
yeah.
South American guy, the copper guy, and Antonia. I think, don't you think that's interesting?
It is interesting, and you can't control it. I mean,
No.
I have an easier time remembering characters I've read than people I've met.
Oh, yeah, that's me
My wife's a
too.
psychologist, and she's really good with people, and I'm always having to turn to her and say, okay, who is this person? Like, you're like, look, we met them 3 years ago, remember? And they are this person, and they're related to this person. Like, okay, got it. I will try this time to lock this in. I'm so bad at it. But yeah, if they're on
You
the
enter a party,
page, they live in my head a little
enter a
more.
party like with your wife. Do you have her be your wingman? So she entered, she says, "Oh, it's so nice to see you again, Tom." And then, you tell her to do that for you. I do that all the
Oh,
time.
oh yeah, and I wish we had like Bluetooth so she could whisper even, so I could hear it. So she could tell
Yeah, and
me,
my wife
remember this person you're
will
talking to? Yeah.
remember their kids, their grandkids. Oh, how's Emily doing? And I'm going, who the hell is Emily?
Yeah. And I also have trouble with chronological memory. My wife is great at this, where I don't remember the order things happen in unless I can remember what age my kids were when it was happening. That's the only way I can sort of organize my life. Like I'll meet somebody and they're like, I know I met them. And I go to a lot of conventions. Science fiction has a lot of conventions. And I met a lot of people that I met 25 years ago. And I don't remember which city it was we were in. I don't remember if I met them 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's all kind of there's a blur of people in my head. The phantom jury is out there. And yeah, but I have my wife to help me. Yeah.
The other thing that's good about the book is sex. There's sex in the book. And remember how when you were a kid and you'd read Robert Heinlein, Theodore Sturgeon, Ray Bradbury, and they couldn't put it in there because they were all nerds and they didn't have girlfriends anyway. And so they couldn't write about sex. And it's not like there's any graphic sex, but it's just like the sex is so easy in the book, It just,
Yeah, well, and late Heinlein started putting more sex in.
yeah, it wasn't good.
Like Lazarus Long, there's a masturbation scene in one of his books, and later Heinlein has a lot of people having sex. Um, and yeah, so I mean, I thought that was part of it too. Is like I think a lot of times I have books that don't have sex in them, but I remember my first novel. I had this sex scene, and I'm giving a reading, and the people in the reading, like, and my wife and my son are there, and my son was 12 at the time, and the person was kind of offended, who stood up and said, "Well, do you let your kids read your books?" I go, "Yeah." It's just like even the sex scenes. I'm like, "Well, here's what I do: is that." Uh, I gave him a copy of the book, and then when the sex scene starts, I write at the top of the page skip, and I page ahead to the end of it, and I write resume. And she goes, "Does that work?" I'm like, "No." But here's what it does. It gives us deniability. Like I can pretend they're never going to read this scene, and they can pretend their father never wrote it.
What I do with my kids is I never lie to them. So I tell them, yeah, when I was 18, I was doing LSD, I was doing mescaline, I was doing peyote, I was doing that. Because, but then my ex-wife would never, ever, ever say something like that. And I find it worked really well because they would try things and they would go, I'm not doing this. Because
I had
yeah,
a
if you
friend of
tell
mine who had a friend of mine had a great answer for that. She always told the truth, but she would say, "I will tell you when it won't have an adverse effect on you." And she would wait until maybe they were 16 instead of 12. And she would say, I'll tell you, just not right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a lot better. But I mean, I didn't tell them when they were 8. I told them when they were like 16. I
Right,
did.
right. Yeah, if you're telling him at the right age, go for it. One of the pleasures of parenthood is when you pick out the exact right moment to show them the movie, like, oh, you're at this age. I think it's time you see Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I think this is the time. I think you've reached the right age. So that's a great joy.
Yeah, that's a good movie to pick out. Okay, well, who's going to listen to us for an hour and 7 minutes and
Oh,
38?
right, right. I guess we should wrap it up. Is there other
Oh, no. Wait,
questions?
one more. We'll just do one more. We didn't talk about the octos. And the reason I want to talk about the octos is simply because they weren't like that. What the simulation made them decide, you know what? And they're groundhogs too. But, or yeah, explain groundhogs, because there's like 5 different kinds of people who react to it, but they're groundhogs, and they've chosen to do something that, hell yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the philosophical arguments is bangers versus groundhoggers. And the bangers means like the world started with a virtual Big Bang and the simulations continued, nonstop, and then we've arrived at this day. And then the groundhoggers, based on Groundhog Day, the movie, they're like, well, no, it could just as easily be that we start every day booted up with our memories in place and we're just reliving the same day over and over again. But then they extend this to the philosophical sort of point of view of like, well, then carpe diem. I mean, if you only got one day, and the octos are these octogenarians, these four people, these 2 couples who are constantly having sex throughout the book, because they're like, we're gonna eat all the ice cream, we're gonna have the sex, we're gonna enjoy every moment, because this is our only day, and I kind of like I appreciated that point of view. I think, yeah, I mean, carpe the diem. You always have to balance it out with if you don't believe you're going to be rebooting, then you have to be, thinking more long term. What's going to make me happier long term? Um, but I still respect the argument for the octos.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to say too is the song that Fish was playing when they came out of the tunnel was, I thought, bouncing around the room, the live version.
Oh, that is completely valid. Yeah, the tunnel we didn't really
Oh,
mention it,
yeah.
but the tunnel lets people when you enter the tunnel connects Kentucky with this place in Utah, and so you can just walk immediately through the tunnel and show up in Utah. Or you can spend as much time as you want. Time doesn't pass while you're in the tunnel. And different characters have different reactions to it. And Dulin, the comic book writer, he's like, "Oh, I'll just work on my scripts. I'll finally catch up on all my scripts." And then he can't take it and he walks out and he doesn't have the scripts finished, which is completely a writer thing to do. Which is even if you have the time, you're not going to work. You're too bored to work on it. You're not going to do it. But Sister Janet, stays for a long time. I won't get into exactly how long she stays, but she stays much longer than anyone else and has a bigger transformation.
Yeah, it's good. Even though we've jumped around and talked about all of that, and we still haven't talked about the most important character in the book, to me, Auntie Tim. I mean, yeah. So we don't have to about, but I think hopefully the way people perceive this interview is that look how enthusiastic I am. So the book,
This is great. It's lovely. Yeah, this makes it a lot of fun, and I feel, yeah, as we hop around, I'm sure people will be confused. So we'll just tell them, just try out the book, hope you dig it, and this will all then go back and listen to this interview again, and it'll all make more sense.
And the other thing is, since I own the bookstore, I can just put the book out on the front table and they come
Right?
in.
And you can make people have conversations with you. You can convert these people.
Annie, the integrated daughter Annie, when she would work at the bookstore, she would go literally. This is what she would do. She would go around the counter, go to the front table, take your book. The next customer that came in, she would go, "Here, you have to buy this," and they would.
Well, I tell, new writers, like when I do go out on tour, almost all the stops are always indie bookstores because you guys are can keep authors alive, and also you can sell what you like in a way that, like, the person working at Barnes and Noble, there's corporate decisions that are being made. Their shelves are a lot of times being stocked from a central ordering system. The new Barnes and Noble seems to have a little more leeway for managers to pick what's on their shelves, but it's still not very much. And so, being able to go and meet booksellers and yeah, and if they dig your book, they will hand sell your book. They'll write those cards, those shelf cards, and it it's so hard these days to have people find your book. And
Yeah.
writers are so needy. I mean, we're a needy group. Like, we're just so it's awfully great when booksellers take an interest, because it can make a huge difference.
I realized, the reason I started my bookstore, I had my books at my house and it filled up my house. So I just took them to a room I rented, threw them on the floor, bought a computer and a box for cash. And then they came home and they were back here again. But the thing about being a bookseller is, one, you have to forget about capitalism. And so some kid came in one day, he's 12 years old, and he brought War and Peace to the counter. And I'm going, shit, I can't charge him for this. He's 12 years old. War and Peace.
This is going to change his life. Yeah.
Yes, you got to give him the book. And the other thing is, if you ever meet a bookseller who tells you he's making a lot of money, he's a liar.
Well, that's usually true about writers too. They usually think,
Exactly.
"Oh, you're a writer. You must be really raking in." And I'm like, "Have you talked to writers?" Yeah, it's a perilous life. But this is why it's good that you did the law degree, you did the law career, and then you get to make choices in your life. Like, I want to be a bookseller. I'm going to put energy into this, and the pressure's off. You can just make a great space for people
Yeah,
to
but when
read.
you get your Netflix series, and then when I ask you for an interview, you'll go, "Oh no, I'm too busy."
Right. No, writers will still be needy, because we'll still answer every podcast request, because once it becomes a TV show, all the focus, all the interviews go to those people who are making the show. Like the weird writer guy who first made the book
Yeah,
is not really of interest.
Very true. But when you have a baby and he grows up, they go away, and your son
Well,
is.
right. I mean, but here's the thing. I've had many things optioned over the years, many close deals with Netflix and Showtime, and nothing has made it to the screen, and probably nothing will, statistically. An editor at Tor told me just this weekend, he was like, well, statistically, no book ever gets adapted. Statistically, this tiny percent, of things that actually make it to the screen is so small. So that's how you have to think about it.
Well, I'll be rooting for you, and I'll try. Yeah, I think it'll work.
Yeah, we're with Ryan Reynolds production company, and we've got showrunners, and but they'll be sending around and pitching it. And if something happens, great. My whole goal is, like, can the TV show sell more books? So I get to have a chance to write one more novel. That's my whole goal.
Well, please do, and we'll talk again.
Sam,
This was
this is great. I love this conversation. Thanks so much for doing it.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of The Avid Reader. If you liked today's episode, check out more of our content on our channel.